My wife found her own signature in our son's new house 6 years after she retired. It was printed at the bottom of a nursing report for a woman Evelyn had never met. The report claimed my wife had examined the woman at 9:00 on a Tuesday morning, evaluated a wound, changed a treatment plan, and approved another week of home visits. At 9:00 that Tuesday, Evelyn had been sitting beside me in a cardiologist's waiting room 40 miles away. But I did not know any of that when she first came down the curved staircase at Nathan's housewarming party. All I knew was that the color had drained from her face. The gathering was set inside a glass and stone house at the outer edge of Indianapolis, Indiana. 3 wooded acres and a gated entry with a camera tucked into a brick pillar surrounded it. 7 bedrooms, a heated pool, a kitchen with 2 islands, and a wine cellar larger than the first apartment Evelyn and I had rented after our wedding. My son had paid Ball $400,000 for it. That, at least, was the figure he had given me. Upward of 80 guests drifted through the rooms, balancing champagne flutes and small plates. A portion were staff from Nathan's company, Hathaway Senior Services. The rest were bankers, county officials, hospital administrators, and men and women whose footwear alone cost more than my first truck. A string quartet played beside the fireplace. Framed photographs of Nathan and his wife Diane had been set out on the shelves, all ready as though the place had been theirs since before memory. I stood near the rear terrace while Nathan talked through his outdoor kitchen with a county commissioner. My son was 44 years old, broad across the shoulders, silver threading into his temples, and he possessed a rare gift for making whoever he spoke to feel the words had been crafted for them alone. He had built Hathaway around a single guiding promise that older people deserved to stay safely in their own homes. Evelyn and I had believed in that promise deeply enough to hand him $85,000 when the company was getting off the ground. Evelyn touched my elbow. "Walter," she said. The word came out low, but 48 years of marriage had taught me the full vocabulary of her silences. There was the quiet she kept in church, the quiet that settled over her when one of our children lay sleeping, the quiet she carried as a nurse whenever a frightened family needed to feel the situation was held. This silence was nothing like any of those. "We need to leave," she whispered. I turned to face her. "Are you sick, no? What happened?" Her grip closed around my sleeve. "Smile first." That did more to frighten me than any scream could have, so I held a smile in place. From across the room, Diane had her eyes on us. She wore an ivory dress and the pearl earrings Nathan had given her on their 10th anniversary. She lifted her glass toward us. I lifted mine back. "Now, walk with me," Evelyn said. "Not toward the front door. Go through the kitchen." We threaded past the islands, exchanged a word with a passing waiter, and slipped into a mudroom lined with hanging coats. Evelyn pressed open the door into the garage. 3 vehicles stood under the wash of bright overhead lights: Nathan's black SUV, Diane's sports car, and a vintage convertible that had once been her father's. Our 16-year-old Chevy pickup sat waiting at the foot of the circular drive. The September night air was a relief after the heat of so many bodies packed into one house. Welcome back to His Hidden Revenge. I'm glad you're here. Before we go any further, drop a comment and tell me what you're up to while you listen. Are you cooking, driving, maybe just resting at the end of a long day? I'd love to know you're out there. A quick note, some elements of this story have been shaped for audio storytelling, and any resemblance to specific real people or events is coincidental. It's the truth inside the story that matters. We walked at an unhurried pace. Halfway down the drive, Nathan called out from behind us. "Dad!" I stopped and turned. He stood beneath the portico, one hand resting in his pocket. "Where are you headed?" Evelyn spoke before I had the chance. "My stomach is bothering me." Nathan moved one step forward. "We have rooms upstairs. You're welcome to lie down. Home will be better," she said. His gaze shifted from her face to mine. It was a brief movement, but there was something calculating behind it. "You haven't seen the lower level yet," he said. "We just finished a guest suite the 2 of you would really love." "Another time," I told him. Diane appeared at his shoulder. "At least let Daniel take you. You've both been drinking." Neither of us had finished half a glass. "I'm perfectly fine," I said. A beat of silence passed through all of us. Then Nathan assembled the warm expression he kept ready for photographs. "Call us when you're home." I opened the passenger door for Evelyn and went around to my side. Neither of us said a word until the gate had closed behind us. "Pull over," she said. There was a small Lutheran church a mile down the road. I turned into its empty lot and cut the engine beneath an oak tree. Evelyn sat with her hands folded in her lap, her gaze fixed on the windshield. I went looking for the restroom she began. One of the caterers pointed me toward the east hallway. I pushed open the wrong door. What did you find? An office not Nathan's regular one? Metal filing cabinets, a document scanner, medication, labels, patient schedules. I waited for her to continue. One of the drawers was standing open, she said. A name on a folder caught my eye. Mrs. Ida Holcomb. I cared for her after her hip surgery 8 years ago. She passed last winter. Perhaps Hathaway had taken her on later, but they billed a supervisory visit to her 3 weeks ago. The stillness of that church parking lot pressed in around us. Evelyn reached into her purse and drew out her phone. She opened a photograph. A white page lay on a dark desk. At the top, the words Clinical Supervisory Review. At the bottom, above a typed license number, was my wife's name, Evelyn Crandall, RN. The signature was hers, not something resembling hers. Hers. My license is still current because of the free clinic. She said that report has me examining a patient last month. Here is one from June, another from April. She scrolled through the photographs. Different names, different addresses, the same signature on each. How many did you see enough? I felt the old instinct rear up inside me, the one whose entire purpose was shielding my family. It had served Nathan when he shattered a neighbor's window at 11. It had carried him through a failed first venture, a divorce, and a stretch when he couldn't meet his tax obligations. Now that same instinct was busy generating explanations. A clerical error, an outdated template, somebody's honest mistake. Then Evelyn showed me the final photograph. It was not a nursing report. It was an invoice for a wheelchair ramp and bathroom conversion at an address on Sycamore Court. The invoice stated the work had been inspected and certified by Crandall Residential Improvements. That had been my company. I had shut it down 9 years earlier. My old state registration number sat beneath a digital copy of my seal. That ramp was billed at $19,000. Evelyn said, "Did you build it?" "No." "Did you inspect it?" "No." She looked at me then. Her eyes had filled, but her voice held. "Walter, according to those records, I have been treating patients for 2 years. And according to those invoices, you have been building their homes." I looked back in the direction of the road that led to our son's mansion. For years, Nathan had told us Hathaway was growing faster than anyone had anticipated. He said, hospitals placed their trust in him. He said county programs valued what he offered. He said his success was proof that a business could serve people and still prosper. The house behind that gate had been raised as a monument to that idea. Now I found myself wondering whose names were buried inside its walls. "We should confront him," I said. Evelyn shook her head. "Not yet. He is our son. That is exactly why." "Not yet," she said, and took my hand. "If there is an innocent explanation waiting, a day won't harm him. If there isn't, tipping him off could put every patient in that file room at risk." I had spent most of my working life measuring twice before I made a cut. It was a discipline I had drilled into hundreds of apprentices and abandoned whenever my own child was the one being measured. That night, for the first time, I chose to judge my son by what the evidence showed rather than what I wanted it to mean. Nathan had not come to elder care as any kind of calling. As a boy, aircraft design was the dream. In high school, it was sports agency. He cycled through 3 majors in college and finished with a degree in business communications that Evelyn once called expensive proof he could hold a conversation. He could, though. Even at 22, Nathan could walk into a room of strangers and leave it knowing everyone's name. People read that ease as shallowness. When he was young, there was real warmth underneath it. He carried groceries for our elderly neighbor without being asked. One winter, he shoveled the walk of a teacher who had recently lost her husband. When Evelyn's mother was diagnosed with Parkinson's disease, Nathan drove her to every appointment without once complaining about the hours. The seed of Hathaway was planted the day my sister Bette fell in her bathroom. She was 79 and lived by herself in a small ranch house outside Muncie. The hospital was ready to send her home, but the bathroom doorway was too narrow for a walker. The front steps had no railing, and no home care agency could get a nurse there for 6 days. Nathan was sitting with us in the hospital cafeteria when he said the whole system made no sense. "The nurse doesn't talk to the contractor," he said. "The contractor doesn't talk to the family. The family dials 10 numbers and collects 10 excuses. Why isn't there one company that handles the whole thing?" Evelyn leaned toward him with genuine interest. "Clinical care and home modifications under one plan, plus transportation meals, equipment, everything that keeps someone from being pushed into a facility, because one doorway is 6 inches too narrow. He spent 6 months digging into licenses billing, systems vendors, and insurance regulations. He asked sharp questions. He sat with Evelyn and absorbed her explanations of care plans and staffing ratios. He followed me through job sites while I walked him through grab bar placement, ramp slope, non-slip flooring, and the difference between making a house accessible and making it feel like a medical ward. When the bank turned down his first loan application, he came to our kitchen table with a 31-page business plan. "I am not here asking for a gift," he said. "I am asking you to invest in something you already know is worth doing." The $85,000 came from savings I had built repairing kitchens on weekends and teaching carpentry during the week. It wasn't our retirement, but it wasn't money we could afford to lose either. Evelyn and I talked it through over 3 evenings. "He has found work that matters," she said. I agreed with her. We drafted a proper loan agreement. Nathan insisted on that. 5% interest payments beginning after 18 months, no ownership stake for us, no say in daily operations. He needed to build something that was entirely his. Those first 2 years were hard. Hearthway ran out of 3 rooms above a pharmacy. Nathan drove patients himself. During the weeks, the transportation coordinator was gone. Diane managed billing at their kitchen table after putting their daughter Ivy to bed. Evelyn volunteered 10 hours a week in those first 3 months, shaping nursing policies and helping interview the company's first clinical supervisor. I lent tools and spent afternoons teaching 2 young workers to install rails without splitting old plaster. Then Evelyn stepped back. At the time, she told me the company had brought on qualified staff and her free help was no longer needed. I took her at her word. Years later, I would discover that was only part of the story. Hearthway began landing contracts. A regional hospital brought it on to cut readmission rates. 2 insurance carriers added it to their networks. County agencies started referring older residents who qualified for home modification grants. Nathan repaid our loan on schedule and returned every tool with fresh blades. His success felt like something he had genuinely earned. At Sunday dinners, he talked about clients who could bathe without fear, veterans coming home from rehabilitation, widows freed from having to choose between groceries and getting somewhere. Evelyn always pressed for specifics. How many registered nurses were overseeing the aides who was verifying visits? What happened when a patient refused care? Nathan answered in the early years. Later, it was Diane who fielded those questions. She had a finance background and a decade in hospital administration behind her. She was sharp, composed, and had little patience for questions she viewed as sentimental. When Evelyn raised staffing concerns, Diane would produce retention figures. When I questioned a construction invoice, she walked me through vendor utilization rates. She had a way of making a reasonable concern sound antiquated by pairing it with a chart. "You two built small businesses," she said to us once. "Healthcare at scale operates by different rules." I remember feeling stung by that, then feeling embarrassed for being stung. Nathan changed in subtler ways. He stopped saying patients and began saying covered lives. He left the office above the pharmacy behind and moved Hearthway into a mirrored building beside the interstate. He brought on a communications director. His Christmas cards began listing corporate awards beneath the family photograph. None of that was evidence of wrongdoing. A thriving company doesn't have to stay modest to stay honest. I told myself that whenever Nathan pulled up in a new car or canceled dinner for a conference, the house was a different matter. He had brought us out to see the property before the first shovel went in. Standing among the trees, he painted a picture of a home where the whole family could come together. He gestured toward a lower terrace. "There'll be a full suite down there," he said. "No steps-wide doorways, a private entrance. If you and Mom ever need to be close to us, you won't have to go anywhere else." Evelyn smiled politely. On the ride home, she said, "He designed our old age without once asking how we wanted to spend it, kindly meant perhaps. Nathan never came to us for money to build the house. That had put me at ease. He said Hearthway had distributed profits after a strong year, and the bank considered the business solid enough to carry the mortgage. At the housewarming, he gave a speech beside the fireplace. He thanked Diane for her faith in him, Ivy, for sharing her father with a demanding mission, and his staff for changing how America grows old. Then he acknowledged us. "My parents taught me that dignity is not a luxury," he said. "Everything Hearthway has become started at their kitchen table." The room applauded. Evelyn pressed my hand. I thought she was moved. She told me later she had felt cornered. If she challenged him after a speech like that, she would look like an ungrateful mother turning on the son who had honored her. If she kept quiet, her name would go on, lending credibility to a company she no longer recognized. That was before she pushed open the wrong door. Back home after the party, we spread her photographs across the kitchen table and pulled out the old Hearthway files we had held onto. The earliest clinical policies carried Evelyn's name as a temporary advisor. The authorization was capped at 90 days and had lapsed more than 8 years before. My construction registration appeared only in 3 original demonstration projects. Each form stated plainly that no future use was permitted without written approval. Evelyn read through the pages twice. When I stopped volunteering, she said it was because Diane asked me to sign off on a patient visit I hadn't supervised. I stared at her. "You never told me that. I made them pull it." Nathan apologized. He said a new employee had lifted the wrong signature block, and I believed him. I wanted to. Those words weren't an accusation. They were a confession we held between us. I sat facing her, surrounded by evidence that our names had entered our son's company through a door we ourselves had left open. "Why didn't you tell me? Because you had just come through the procedure on your heart. Because you were so proud of him. Because he corrected it when I insisted." Her gaze dropped. "And because I couldn't let one bad form become the reason you lost your son." Outside wind moved through the maple beside our porch. Its branches brushed softly against the eaves. "What do we do now?" I asked. Evelyn closed the file. "We find out whether it was only one bad form." The address on the ramp invoice belonged to a woman named Agnes Whitaker. I recognized the street before the name registered. Sycamore Court was a row of modest houses built in the years after the Korean War. Shallow roofs, small front porches, and maple trees that had long since grown large enough to buckle sections of sidewalk. I had installed rails in 2 of those houses through a church volunteer program. Evelyn and I didn't drive over right away. We spent Sunday morning working out what we could learn without alarming a patient or muddying any evidence. Neither of us was an attorney. Neither of us wanted to convert suspicion into accusation, simply because our names had appeared somewhere they had no business being. At noon, I called Loretta Finch. Loretta had been our lawyer for 23 years. She had managed the sale of my company, drawn up our wills, and once blocked a contractor from filing a lien against my widowed sister's house. She was 68, compact, plain-spoken, and unmoved by family loyalty when documents said something else. She listened without breaking in. "Don't call Nathan," she said when I finished. That was Evelyn's advice, too. Evelyn is right. My wife raised an eyebrow as though this outcome had never been in any doubt. Loretta asked us to send copies of our original agreements, not the photographs from the patient files. Those, she said, might contain protected medical information. Evelyn should keep those images secure, show them only to counsel or investigators, and not transmit them through regular email. "Can we reach out to the woman on Sycamore Court?" I asked. "Only if you have an independent connection to her. Don't position yourself as conducting an investigation. If she chooses to show you her own bills or records, that is a different matter." I did know Agnes, though, not closely. 5 years earlier, our church had taken on a request to repair her porch rail after she fractured a wrist. I had led the work crew. She made lemonade and corrected my grammar while we measured posts. A retired school librarian who held precision to be a form of courtesy. When I phoned, she remembered me. "Mr. Crandall," she said, "the man who thinks a semicolon is decorative. I've improved. At your age, improvement is a lovely rumor." Her wit loosened something in me. I told her I was checking in on old volunteer projects and asked whether the porch rail was still holding up. That was true as far as it went. She invited us for coffee the following afternoon. Agnes was 84. She came to the door on a walker and wore a burgundy cardigan despite the warm day. The original rail I had put in was solid. A short wooden ramp ran from the porch down to the driveway. It was newer than the rail, but plain. Treated lumber basic handrails, no concrete foundation. Hearthway built that, I asked? Their subcontractor did. 3 boys who spent most of the morning arguing about a level. Inside, Evelyn admired the shelves that lined Agnes's living room walls. We talked about books, the church, and how Sycamore Court had changed. I didn't bring up the invoice until Agnes complained about insurance statements she couldn't make sense of. "Would you like Evelyn to look at them?" I asked. She used to supervise home care. Agnes went into the bedroom and came back carrying a grocery bag stuffed with envelopes. The explanation of benefits forms showed Hearthway billing for nursing visits, personal care assistance, transportation, and a major accessibility modification package. Agnes had received some services. An aide came 3 mornings a week. A driver took her to physical therapy. Someone had put in the ramp, but the dates and amounts didn't line up with her memory. "This says a nurse visited you on August 14th. Evelyn said, "I was in Wisconsin with my niece that whole week. August 18th, still in Wisconsin. September the 2nd. Agnes glanced at the calendar hanging beside her telephone. That was Labor Day. No one came. I found the construction line. The program had been billed $18,900 for a modular aluminum ramp reinforced landing, widened exterior door, bathroom grab bar system, and electrical safety upgrade. The wooden ramp outside couldn't have run more than $2,000 even with labor. Her doorway had not been widened. The bathroom held a single grab bar, a retail unit screwed into drywall with anchors I would never have sanctioned. At the foot of the itemized statement sat my old registration number. Did I inspect this work? I asked. Agnes laughed. You're here now. Before today. Her smile went quiet. No. Evelyn asked whether Agnes had signed any completion forms. She remembered a tablet. A young man from Hearthway had told her the signature was simply confirming the ramp had been delivered. She hadn't been able to read the whole document because the screen kept scrolling. Am I in trouble? She asked. That question shifted the air in the room. An 84-year-old woman had been overbilled, poorly served, and left with a dangerous grab bar, and her first instinct was to fear she'd done something wrong. No, Evelyn said. She moved to Agnes's side and laid a hand over hers. You are not in any trouble. I went to the bathroom and tested the bar. It gave under half my weight. Do not use this, I called out. Agnes appeared in the doorway. It's the only thing I have to hold when I step into the tub. I took off my belt, threaded it through the bar, and pulled. One anchor tore straight out of the wall. Evelyn drew a sharp breath. I thought of Hearthway's advertisements. Safety, dignity, independence. Then I thought of my seal printed beneath an invoice claiming I had approved this installation. I photographed everything with Agnes's permission. I measured the ramp, the doorway, and the bar placement. Loretta later arranged for Agnes to sign a statement and request her complete records directly from Hearthway. We paid a licensed contractor of Agnes's choosing to replace the bar that same week. I didn't do the work myself. I wanted an independent set of eyes on it. Before we left, Agnes walked us out to the porch. Your son owns that company, doesn't he? She asked. I could have said no. The truth sat heavy, but I couldn't set it down. Yes. She studied my face for a moment. That must make all of this harder. It does. It should not make the truth feel smaller. On the drive home, Evelyn and I went several miles without a word. At a red light, she said she was afraid we would blame her. I know. How many others are afraid? I didn't answer because I had begun turning over a different question. How many properties carried my name beneath work I never would have signed off on? Loretta arranged our first formal meeting for Tuesday morning. Her conference room looked out over the county courthouse. On the wall hung a framed photograph of her father standing in front of the grocery store he had opened after arriving from Korea with a single suitcase. Loretta believed every legal problem came down eventually to a question about what people thought they were entitled to. Money, land, truth, or someone else's silence. She brought in a healthcare compliance attorney named Patricia Drummond. Patricia didn't speak for effect. She went through each page, asked where it originated, and drew a clean line between what we knew and what we only suspected. We knew Evelyn's name and active nursing license number appeared on current clinical records. We knew my expired contractor registration and digital seal appeared on a current accessibility invoice. We knew at least one patient had been billed for visits that never happened and construction that was not completed as described. We suspected this was part of something larger. Don't access Hearthway's systems, Patricia said. Don't ask an employee to pull files. Don't record private conversations unless counsel confirms that's lawful. Preserve what you already have and let the patients request their own records. Should Evelyn notify the nursing board? I asked. Soon and through counsel, her license may be at risk, even though she is a victim. Evelyn's shoulders dropped slightly. She had understood that before anyone put it into words. I should have reported that first false form. 8 years ago, she said. Patricia looked at her. You corrected a form and withdrew your authorization. That is not consent for 2 years of identity misuse. We will be straightforward about the history. Honesty is your protection here. Then she turned to me. Did your son have access to a digital copy of your seal? He did during Hearthway's first year. I certified 3 demonstration projects. How was the file stored? I pictured the old office above the pharmacy, one shared computer folders labeled by project passwords written beneath the keyboard because Nathan said everyone was family. Poorly secured, I admitted. After the meeting, Loretta asked Evelyn to stay back with Patricia. She walked me into her own office and closed the door. Nathan may call before we are ready, she said. Why Agnes's records request will be noticed if the company monitors unusual activity someone may connect it to you. What do I say? As little as possible. Don't lie. Don't make accusations. Tell him you won't discuss company matters without counsel present. I looked through her window at the courthouse steps. He'll know, perhaps. He is my son. Loretta settled back in her chair. That tells me how you are related. It doesn't tell me what he did. I disliked her for saying it. I trusted her for exactly that reason. Nathan called that evening. Evelyn and I were finishing soup at the kitchen table. His name came up on my phone and we both went still. Answer it, she said. I put the phone on speaker. Dad, how is Mom better? She left early, Saturday. Diane has been worried. Her stomach settled. There was a pause. Did she go into the East office? The question was too pointed to be casual. Why do you ask? One of the staff said a door was left open. There are confidential records in that room. Then the room should have been locked. Another pause longer than the first. Did she take anything? Evelyn looked at me. I heard Loretta's voice in my head. Don't lie. She photographed pages that bear her name, I said. Nathan exhaled. Dad, those are internal working copies. They indicate she treated patients. It's complicated. Is it? We moved to a new record system. Old authorization templates can populate automatically. Diane already has people looking into it. My mind went back to a summer afternoon when Nathan was 12. He had been helping me build cabinets and wanted to understand how I marked completed work. I showed him my inspection stamp and explained that a signature wasn't decoration. It meant the person behind it was willing to stand under everything it authorized. He practiced writing my name on scraps of wood until his lettering looked like mine. Why is my contractor's seal on Agnes Whitaker's invoice? I asked. Silence. Then his voice shifted. You went to a client, I went to a woman I know. Dad, you can't insert yourself into patient relationships. You could expose Hathaway to serious penalties. My name is on work I never inspected. You gave us permission to use your credentials for 3 projects 9 years ago. That is not how our records read. Evelyn closed her eyes. Then your records are wrong, I said. Nathan dropped his voice. Please don't act on anything before I have a chance to explain. Come to the office tomorrow. Just you and Mom. We'll walk you through how the system works. Send the explanation through our attorney. He didn't speak for several seconds. You hired an attorney. We already had one. Against me. There it was. Not worry about patients. Not shock that false records existed. Betrayal that we had moved to protect ourselves before handing him control of the narrative. For the truth, I said. His answer came quietly. Be careful who you share those photographs with. Mom could lose her license. You could face a lawsuit. And once accusations get into circulation, people stop remembering who put them there. The call ended. Evelyn stared at the phone. Was that a warning, she asked? Yes, or a threat? I thought about the boy copying my signature on pine boards. I thought about the man telling me that records carried more weight than my recollection. Both, I said. The first letter from Hathaway arrived by courier the next morning. It was addressed to Evelyn. Inside was a copy of a consulting agreement dated January 8th, the 2 years earlier. Under the terms of the agreement, Evelyn had accepted responsibility as a part-time clinical advisor and authorized Hathaway to apply her electronic signature to supervisory documents. Her name appeared on the final page. The signature was clean-centered and false. The second letter was addressed to me. It contained a vendor certification stating that Crandall Residential Improvements remained an approved inspection partner. My seal appeared beside a date on which Evelyn and I had been aboard a train through Canada. Both letters directed us to contact Hathaway's general counsel with any questions. They had assembled an answer overnight. Evelyn said Patricia reviewed the documents that same afternoon. She did not use the word forged. Lawyers choose their words carefully before specialists have examined ink metadata and signature histories. These documents are inconsistent with your records, she said. That is sufficient for now. Loretta sent Hathaway formal notice to preserve all emails, access logs, billing records, signature files, and patient documentation connected to either of our names. She also notified our insurers and the state agencies that held our professional registrations. The letters were precise, narrow, and impossible to misread. Someone had used our identities. We had not authorized it. Records must not be destroyed. Within 48 hours, the first family rumor found us. My younger brother called from Florida. Nathan says you are trying to seize control of his company. Nathan is wrong, I said. He says Evelyn forgot signing a consulting agreement. Evelyn was seated across from me. I watched her take in the words through the speaker. She did not forget. Walter, people forget things. That doesn't make them dishonest. The insult had been wrapped in so much sympathy, my brother probably believed he was showing concern. Ask Nathan why a woman who died last winter received nursing care last month, I said. He went quiet. Then he told me he had no wish to be caught in the middle. People say that when they have already settled on the easier side. Patricia helped us file formal identity misuse reports with the nursing board and the state contractor registration office. A Medicaid fraud investigator named Marisol Vega contacted Loretta and asked for an interview. The interview ran 4 hours. Marisol was in her 50s with a composed manner and a legal pad filled with tight, careful handwriting. She didn't indicate whether Hathaway was already under review. She asked how Nathan came to have our credentials when the authorization ended, what Evelyn had seen at the house, and whether we had received any financial benefit from the current billing. We lent the company $85,000 at the start, I said. It paid us back with interest. Had we received distributions? No. Travel vehicles, home repairs at our expense? No. Had Nathan helped with our mortgage or medical costs? No. Marisol asked the same questions in different arrangements. I understood why. Family fraud persists by disguising personal benefit as ignorance. When she asked Evelyn about the false nursing forms, my wife answered with precision until Marisol reached the single incorrect form from 8 years before. I made them remove it, Evelyn said. Did you report it? No. Why not? Evelyn looked at me, then back at Marisol. Because the owner was my son. Marisol set down her pen. Mrs. Crandall, what I'm about to say may be hard to receive. Professionals are required to flag misuse within their own families precisely because family loyalty is the mechanism most reliably used to keep it going. Evelyn nodded. I understand that now. She offered no defense. It was one of the most courageous things I ever witnessed her do. The investigator requested the housewarming photographs and Agnes's records. Agnes consented through her attorney. Her insurer launched a separate review. A licensed inspector came out and documented both the unsafe bathroom bar and the gap between what the work actually was and what had been billed. I started compiling a record from publicly available sources. County grant filings named the addresses where Hathaway had drawn funding for home modification work. Court documents turned up disputes with subcontractors. State corporate registrations exposed 3 affiliated entities sharing Hathaway's mailing address. I set foot in none of the properties. I reached out to no patients except through proper channels. I cataloged only what anyone could have lawfully found. 63 projects bore my registration number. 63. A handful were minor. Many others claimed full bathroom conversions, stair lifts, widened entrances, reinforced porches, and emergency electrical upgrades. When added up, the billed value ran past $900,000. My name wasn't confined to the footer of invoices. It showed up in grant applications identifying me as Hathaway's senior accessibility specialist. A company biography described me as an actively practicing consultant with 40 years behind me. The website ran a photograph of Nathan and me, taken the day his first office opened. The caption said, 3 generations of Crandall care, though Ivy had been cut out of the frame. They constructed a version of us, I told Evelyn. A version they found useful, she said. That version of Evelyn never pressed anyone on staffing. That version of me put his name on every project. Neither of those people grew older, pushed back, or pulled their consent. They existed for one purpose: to make Hathaway look credible. The nursing board placed a provisional flag on Evelyn's license while the report was under review. She wasn't suspended, but the free clinic asked her to step away from volunteering until the board reached a conclusion. That call arrived from the clinic director on a Thursday. Nobody here thinks you did this, the woman told her. We just can't have patients in the middle while the board works through it. Evelyn thanked her calmly. Then she walked into our bedroom and shut the door behind her. When I followed, she was perched on the edge of the mattress, her volunteer badge resting in her lap. You did nothing wrong. There is one thing I did wrong, she said. 8 years ago, I saw what that form was, and I let it stay a family matter instead of taking it to the people it belonged to. You stopped it. I stopped a single page. I sat down next to her. Through most of our years together, Evelyn had been the steady one, the one everyone else steadied themselves against. She had walked into households where grown children were resentful, partners were hollow with exhaustion, and frail patients were barely holding on. That badge was never just a credential. It stood for the reality behind the composure that frightened people borrowed when they had none of their own. Our son had reached into that and priced it per billing unit. What you chose not to report cannot be undone, I said. What we do from here still can be. She turned her eyes to the window. What comes next could put Nathan behind bars. I know. Can you carry that? The truthful answer didn't come quickly. I can carry telling the truth, I said. Whatever that costs him, that account belongs to decisions he made long after we showed him the difference between right and wrong. Evelyn set the badge in the nightstand drawer. Then we don't stop. Our granddaughter showed up past midnight 3 days on. Ivy didn't present herself like a guest. She let herself in with the brass key we'd handed her at 16 and called out from the entryway. Grandma. Evelyn and I had been in bed. By the time I got down the stairs, Ivy was under the hallway, light a backpack hanging off one shoulder, tears tracking down her face. She was 21. Nathan's height, but she had Evelyn's watchful eyes. She was enrolled in health information management at a community college and putting in part-time hours in Hearthway's records department. Nathan framed that as hands-on preparation. Ivy called it how she paid her tuition. Did your father do something to hurt you? I asked. No. Did Diane know? I'm not sure. There's something I need you to see, but I don't know whether I'm permitted. Evelyn put a robe around her shoulders and walked her to the kitchen. We made coffee. None of us drank. Ivy had been picking up on problems for months. The job was meant to be straightforward. Scan, visit notes, match them to the right accounts. Then a supervisor started pulling her aside to correct dates on forms that had already been signed and filed. When she raised the issue, she was told Hearthway's continuity documentation system allowed for late entry reconciliation. A nurse can document a visit after the fact, if the visit actually occurred, Evelyn said. That doesn't extend to manufacturing one entirely. I've come to understand that. Ivy reached into her bag, then went still with her hand on the laptop. Dad has been telling everyone you and Grandpa have gotten confused. His story is that you both executed agreements a long time back and lost track of them. Then Diane put me on an audit every record tied to your license number. Did you run it? Evelyn asked. I got started. There were hundreds. Ivy had come across her grandmother's electronic signature on wound assessments, medication, plan sign-offs, and aid oversight records. Certain visits fell on days when Evelyn was out of state. Others were attributed to people who had already passed. I grabbed screenshots, Ivy said, and I sent some messages to my own email. Loretta's instructions came back to me at once. Don't let us see any of it, I said. Ivy looked at me as though I'd shut a door in her face. Grandpa, your names are all over what they're doing. I don't doubt you, and that is the reason we have to handle this the right way. I dialed Loretta. She picked up after 4 rings, sounding like someone dragged from sleep who held it against the legal profession for not observing normal hours. When I gave her Ivy's name and explained where she worked, the sleep was gone. Keep the company laptop shut, she said. Touch nothing, send nothing else. Before Ivy hands over any material, she needs her own attorney. Will they arrest me? Ivy breathed. Not for coming to your grandparents, but the choices you make tonight and tomorrow carry weight. Loretta lined up a whistleblower attorney to see Ivy first thing the next morning. The laptop sat untouched on our kitchen counter until then. Once the call was done, Ivy cried harder than before. I knew it wasn't right, she said. I kept showing up anyway. Because you trusted your father? I offered. Is that an excuse? No. It's a fact. Facts are how we make sense of the road that brought us here. They don't settle what we do at the end of it. Evelyn drew close to her. Had you ever put your signature on clinical records? No. Did you invent visit entries? No. Did you alter dates? Ivy paused before answering. Twice. Then I quit. What made you stop? A progress note said, a patient walked 30 feet with support. I had scanned her death notice the week before. The room held that in silence. Ivy had gone to her supervisor. She was told the date of death had been logged incorrectly and to stay in her lane. The following morning, her system access was quietly cut back. Diane summoned her upstairs for lunch. She told me, Hearthway had a real future for me, Ivy said. She said, your dad built all of this with you in mind. Then she asked me whether Grandma had been getting forgetful. Evelyn's expression closed like a door. What did you tell her? I said, everybody forgets things sometimes. And after that, she asked whether you were still driving. Something moved through me, sharp and hot. Evelyn laid her hand across mine. Ivy hadn't gone back after the housewarming. Nathan instructed her to take the week away from work and stay out of contact with us while he sorted out what he was calling a misunderstanding. That same night, she caught him and Diane in an argument. Dad kept saying the house had become too conspicuous, Ivy told us. Diane said that conspicuous success was the whole reason the investors held their confidence. Then he brought up how much could be moved before the document preservation order hit. Moved to where I asked. She said she told him not to discuss it inside the house. That gave me the answer to the question Nathan had thrown at us on our way out of the party. He hadn't been afraid Evelyn misread a template. He'd been afraid she'd looked past the template at what was running underneath it. Ivy slept in our guest room that night. At the breakfast table, she appeared younger than she had a few hours before. Whatever composure she carried at school and at work, fear had taken it apart. Her attorney was at Loretta's office by 10 Zuri Row. Marisol Vega was formally notified through the correct channel by noon. The company laptop and Ivy's personal messages were secured without any of the contents passing through our hands. The investigators would determine what was usable. Nathan rang Ivy 23 times throughout the day. She let every call go. At 4:00 of that afternoon, his car turned into our driveway. I was on the porch before his foot touched the first step. Where is she? Safe. She is my daughter. She is of age. You've poisoned her against me. I didn't tell her a single thing in those records. He went still at the bottom of the steps. It was the first moment since this began that my son's face showed fear instead of anger. Dad, there are dimensions of the company's operations that aren't visible from the outside. I understand that a woman who died last winter didn't receive nursing care last month. That's billing reconciliation. Services get bundled. Dates get shifted. Did Mom give you authority to use her signature? She contributed to building the clinical framework. That wasn't what I asked. Nathan's eyes moved past me to the front door. What you're about to hear is the moment everything that had been quietly building finally had to be spoken out loud, face to face on a porch with no room left for pretending. Before we get there, tell me this. If someone you loved had been using your name behind your back, would you confront them the moment you knew, or would you wait until your proof was airtight? Let Ivy come home first. Then we can talk. Her lawyer will handle the rest. His face shifted. You hired my daughter a lawyer. She came to me for help. You are destroying this family. I had turned that line over in my mind many times since the housewarming. In every version I had a ready answer, something that cut through and left him ashamed. But standing on that porch, I understood shame cannot find its way into someone who reads every consequence as an attack. No, I said, I am done helping you cover up what already broke it. Nathan climbed one step toward me. If Hearthway goes under, 300 people are out of work. Hundreds of patients lose the care they depend on. Can you carry that? The care had already failed them, not entirely, but it had failed. At what point does fraud become forgivable because some of the work was real? He had no answer to that. The front door opened behind me. Ivy came out onto the porch with Evelyn. I'm staying, she told him. Nathan's face softened. Sweetheart, you don't understand what your grandfather has set in motion here. I know Grandma never signed those notes. This isn't a front yard conversation. You sent Diane to find out whether Grandma was losing her mind. He looked at Evelyn. Whatever rebuttal he had readied simply fell away. That was not my idea. It was the first true thing he had said to us. It was a confession. Ivy began to cry. Nathan reached a hand toward her, and she stepped back from it. He stood in our yard, encircled by 3 generations his company had featured in its own marketing. Not one of us moved. He walked back to his car. He rolled the window down before pulling away. When this goes public, he said, you'll wish you had let me handle it quietly. Ivy watched until his taillights were gone. Will I? She said. I held her close. There'll be things you regret, I told her. Letting him carry on won't be among them. Nathan made good on his threat. He did not contact a reporter or put our names anywhere online. He chose something more calculated. He carried a neatly shaped account to the people who loved all of us. His version, Evelyn had once held a legitimate clinical advisory role but had lost track of the timeline. I had overreacted, brought in lawyers shown up at a vulnerable client's home without clearance. Ivy, worn thin by school and family strain, had simply misread what were standard corrections to older records. Hearthway was working with regulators to clear up documentation problems left behind by a software changeover. The account moved easily because so much of it was true. Evelyn had advised the company. I had gone to see a client. Ivy had altered 2 dates. The software had been replaced. A lie travels farthest when the truth is doing half the carrying. 2 cousins phoned us asking for peace. A former employee wrote to say Nathan had always cared for this family. Our pastor offered church mediation. When I described the patient safety and billing dimensions of the matter, his comfort level dropped. Families need grace, he said. Patients need genuine care, he conceded. But he still wondered whether we might hold off until after Christmas. Scandal does not keep to a convenient schedule. The call I dreaded most came from my sister Bet, whose fall years before had first drawn Nathan into elder care. Nathan says the company may close because of you, she told me. The company may close because its records are false, I said. He was there for me when nobody else was. I know that. Doesn't it mean anything? It means something. It doesn't undo Agnes's dangerous bathroom or Evelyn's stolen signature. Bet wept. She could not choose, she said, between her brother and her nephew. You don't have to choose between people, I told her. Choose whether a signature carries any weight at all. She ended the call without answering. Quietly, the investigation kept widening. The insurance review tied to Agnes's case turned up 6 more clients whose files held the same signature pattern. 2 families agreed to talk with investigators. 1 client had been billed for transportation on days his carer had driven him at no charge. A widow's bathroom renovation was recorded on paper and nowhere else. Another patient's file showed more aid hours than he ever received. The pattern did not reach every claim or every resident. Hearthway employed real nurses, diligent aides, honest drivers, and construction crews who did the work. That legitimacy made the fraud harder to see. Real care gave false claims a place to hide. Trustworthy employees made dishonest billing look credible. Patricia told us some agencies weather thin documentation and scattered over billing. Systematic fabrication of professional credentials was an entirely different category. Who knew, she said, is the question that matters. And from what moment former employees began bringing us pieces of the answer. A one-time billing manager reached out to Loretta after word spread that Evelyn had denied signing the records. She described internal sessions the company called gap reviews. Staff brought forward services that couldn't be reimbursed because the underlying documentation was missing. Diane would instruct them to comb through archived files for any older authorization that might be stretched to fit. When nothing turned up, entries were built from electronic templates. Was Nathan present in those meetings? I asked Loretta. The witness puts him there for several of them. I walked out to my workshop and stood among tools I had owned longer than Nathan had been alive. Some parents uncover a single terrible thing and wall it off, decide it cannot speak for who their child truly is. I understand that. A life is bigger than one act. But this was never one act. It was a door he walked through each morning. It was a choice made fresh every time a false visit was logged, a flimsy grab bar signed off on, or a worker told to change a date. Nathan passed the exit hundreds of times. The state nursing board scheduled Evelyn for a formal interview. She spent days preparing. She assembled correspondence, original policy documents, the letter ending her role at Hearthway, and a careful accounting of dates. The morning of the interview, she put on the navy suit she had worn to her own retirement ceremony. You look like you're headed to work, I said. I am, she told me. The interview ran 2 hours. Ivy and I sat in the hallway. When Evelyn came out, she looked tired and settled at once. They asked whether I would report my son if I had it to do again. What did you say? I asked. I said I would report the form, not the boy. And then I would stand with the boy while he faced what the form showed. The board left the review open, but reinstated her volunteer standing under temporary supervision. The clinic director phoned that afternoon to ask when she could return. Evelyn said, Saturday. You don't have to rush back, I told her. That's exactly what shame is counting on. At the clinic, patients were simply glad she was there. None of them knew she had been gone for any particular reason. She checked blood pressures, went through medication lists, and gave 20 minutes to a widower who needed help making sense of a discharge sheet. I watched from the waiting area. Her hands were steady. Her name was fully hers again in that room. That same week, our bank froze a small business account tied to my former company. Hearthway's lawyers had filed a notice asserting ownership interests in work performed under my professional credentials. No funds were removed, but $22,000 reserved for property taxes and volunteer repairs was suddenly unreachable. Loretta described it as intimidation, dressed in contract language. Diane's side called it an asset protection measure. Then a certified letter arrived demanding repayment of the $85,000 startup loan with interest. The company's position was that the original transfer had been an equity contribution, not a loan, and that what Nathan had paid back to us over the years were improper distributions. They wanted us to return money Nathan had already repaid. Why now? Ivy asked when the letter reached her. Pressure, Loretta said. Litigation is costly. They're counting on your grandparents to conclude that peace is cheaper than the truth. The figure wouldn't break us, but it was large enough to force a reckoning. If the bank matter grew, if Evelyn required separate licensing counsel, if Hathaway filed suit, the savings of decades could drain away. That evening I found Evelyn at the kitchen table with a yellow legal pad. She had set out our accounts, monthly costs, projected legal fees, and what my shop equipment might fetch. We could let go of the lake lot, she said. That land had held our retirement inside it. 8 acres along a narrow lake, a worn cabin we patched up slowly each summer. Nathan had learned to fish there. Ivy had learned to swim there. We always meant to leave it to her. Not yet, I said. Walter, we can't pretend the choice isn't sitting in front of us. That is precisely what they want. Wanting it doesn't make the numbers disappear. We sat with the arithmetic laid out between us and said nothing. Principled resolve sounds clean until the first invoice arrives. Then it becomes a question of whether the truth is worth a roof, a retirement, or money set aside for a grandchild. Evelyn reached across the table toward me. If fear of losing that cabin is what stops us, she said, we'll never go back there and feel anything but hollow. I studied the columns she had drawn up. Then we sell it when we must, I said. She nodded. It was a hard thing to settle. It also released something. Nathan had been holding the unknown cost of this fight over us. Once we named the price ourselves, that leverage was gone. He and Diane arrived at our door together on the first Sunday in October. Loretta had counseled us against discussing the investigation without legal representation present. We let them know she would be joining us. Diane objected, then walked in alongside Hathaway's general counsel, a man named Gideon Spear. The 4 of them took seats around the same oak table where Nathan had laid out his business plan 10 years earlier. I put the coffee on. Out of habit, Evelyn had set a plate of cookies on the table. Nobody reached for one. Nathan carried the look of a man who hadn't slept. His suit sagged at the shoulders, the easy confidence he usually wore entirely absent. Diane was unchanged from the housewarming, controlled, ready, and quietly hostile toward anything beyond her grip. Gideon cracked open a leather folder. Everyone in this room is trying to protect the family and the patients, he said. Loretta cut in. Then spare us the opening remarks and get to the proposal. He pushed a document toward us. Hathaway was prepared to admit administrative misuse of Evelyn's nursing identifier and my contractor registration. The company would clean up affected records, cover our legal bills to a set ceiling drop, all claims tied to the startup money, and send $200,000 to a local senior charity. Our side, Evelyn and I, would execute retroactive consulting agreements stating Hathaway had always held authority to store and use our credentials. Every improper use would be characterized as unintentional software error. We would pull back complaints wherever the law allowed, turn down voluntary interviews, and never speak ill of the company. Ivy would step down, surrender all materials, and execute her own confidentiality agreement. You're asking us to ratify records we never authorized, Evelyn said. We want to clarify that the authorization you gave was wider than the paper trail shows, Diane replied. It was not. You helped build the system. I helped draft the policies. I never handed you my name without limit. Nathan leaned toward her. Mom, nobody is asking you to put your blessing on fabricated care. We're asking you to recognize an ambiguous handoff. Did Mrs. Holcomb receive care 3 weeks after she had already died? His gaze fell. Diane fielded it. Individual cases need to be examined in their full context. Death is a fairly clear context, I said. Gideon raised a hand. This is not the place to argue facts. You are the ones who brought a contract into our kitchen, Loretta said. Nathan eased his chair back slightly. Dad, if nothing gets resolved, Hathaway goes under before any court settles what happened. The banks are circling. Referrals have dried up. People worth keeping are already walking out. Did you attend GAP review meetings? I asked. His eyes moved to Diane. That single glance told me more than any denial could have. I was present at operational meetings, he said. Diane handled billing. Irritation broke across her face for the first time. You signed off on every reconciliation policy. On the strength of your reports. Don't, she said quietly. The room shifted. Until that moment, they had arrived as a unified front. One sentence from Nathan revealed he was already hunting for solid ground to stand on when it all came apart. Evelyn caught it the same instant I did. When did you first learn my signature was being used? She asked him. I knew your identifier was still active in the system. That isn't what I asked. He pressed both hands over his face. A hospital contract demanded clinical oversight ratios we couldn't meet. We had nurses, we had visits. The write-ups were running behind. Diane had told the system to slot in an approved supervisory template while the notes caught up. My template, Evelyn said, in the beginning. And when did you find out visits were being generated that never happened? Diane turned to him. You are not required to answer that. Nathan kept his eyes on the table. Last year, the words settled quietly over the room. Evelyn held still. Last year, she said back to him, and I had already ordered an internal review. Meanwhile, you purchased a $100,000 to $400,000 house. The house carries a mortgage. Serviced by what income? My compensation drawn from claims carrying my name. He met her eyes then, and I saw the frightened boy behind the executive. For one unguarded second, I wanted to reach across that distance. I nearly steered the blame toward Diane and told him to come home. Then Agnes's face surfaced in my mind the way she had asked quietly whether she had done anything wrong. We had arranged a divisional sale, Nathan said. The proceeds would have cleared every billing irregularity. Patients would keep their care. Staff would keep their jobs. Nobody would walk away with nothing. A patient grabbed a loose safety bar and nearly fell. That installation was a subcontractor, I said. My seal stood behind it. I never put that bar in the wall, neither did I. But you used my seal so the government would believe a responsible party had signed off. He moved to the window. You think a company still runs like a one-man shop? One person measures one person, signs, one person owns what follows. That is not the reality of an organization this size. Then why did you still need one person's signature? He had nothing. Diane's hand moved toward the contract. This offer closes Friday. Evelyn laid her palm flat across the pages. Leave it. Something like hope moved over Nathan's face. My wife held his gaze. I want to be able to recall exactly what my son put in front of me to sign. Diane withdrew her hand. They left without touching the coffee. At the front door, Nathan stopped and turned. If I end up in prison, Mom, was it worth it? Evelyn's face broke just for a moment. She loved him. Every terrible thing that had happened lived inside, that love unchanged. What had changed was the right to lean on it. I am not condemning you to prison, she said. I am refusing to hand that sentence to an innocent nurse contractor or patient in your place. He looked at me. I opened the door. When their cars had gone, Evelyn came back to the kitchen and sat before the contract. Her hands weren't steady. I wanted to sign it, she whispered. I know. For 1 second I was ready to sign anything that would make him our son again. I sat beside her. He is still our son. Then why does telling the truth feel like losing him? I had nothing that could make the pain smaller. So I took her hand, and we stayed at that table where Hearthway had first taken shape until the coffee went cold. The first Hearthway employee to come to our door arrived on a rainy Wednesday. Her name was Kezia Burgess. She had been among the company's earliest home health aides and now supervised 32 caregivers. Evelyn remembered the interview above the pharmacy. Kezia had shown up 20 minutes early, brought 3 reference letters, and asked whether the company built in enough travel time between patients. A rushed aide is a dangerous aide, she had said. Evelyn hired her that afternoon. Now she stood on our porch in wet scrubs, an envelope in her hand. I'm not supposed to contact you, she said. I don't even know if coming here is right. Don't hand us anything, I told her. We'll get our attorney on the phone. Relief crossed her face. Within an hour, Loretta had connected Kezia with independent counsel and the investigator. We never opened the envelope. Before she left, Kezia asked to speak with Evelyn privately. My wife walked her into the living room. I waited in the kitchen and could hear Kezia crying through the wall. Evelyn explained it to me later. Kezia had genuinely believed Hearthway was one of the better agencies. When her team was properly staffed, the care they delivered was real and good. She had driven through a snowstorm on her own time to bring insulin to a homebound client. She had sat with a dying veteran so he wouldn't be alone before his daughter arrived. She had taught her aides to pause and listen before touching anyone who seemed frightened, but sufficient staffing had become rare. Schedulers routed the same aide to patients 40 minutes apart in different towns. Missed visits were quietly logged as rescheduled. By month's end, billing sometimes showed the original visit completed and a second visit tacked on beside it. Kezia filed complaints. Diane's team came back with figures showing a 97% service rate. I knew that number wasn't right, she told Evelyn, but I assumed it meant someone above me was patching the gaps. I never imagined they were patching the records. Her envelope held duplicates of every complaint she had submitted through Hathaway's internal compliance channel. That channel was designed to be anonymous. After her second filing, Diane called her in and read a line from it aloud. She knew it was me, Kezia said. She said loyalty was what kept a growing company strong. Hathaway employed many people like Kezia, dedicated nurses, aides, drivers, carpenters, and schedulers doing honest work, while the reports stacked above them converted that work into cover. Whenever Nathan warned that 300 employees would be hurt by the investigation, he was stating a fact. He was also deploying those same workers the way he had deployed our credentials as insulation. That understanding changed how I talked about the company. I stopped calling Hathaway fraudulent. I said its leadership had sanctioned false documentation. I stopped claiming its care was a fiction. I said genuine care had been blended with billing for services that were never delivered. The precision wasn't a courtesy to Nathan, it was owed to workers who deserved separation from his choices. That distinction became urgent when the county named Hathaway as its top choice for a 5-year aging-at-home partnership. The arrangement would link transportation, nursing meals, and home modifications for thousands of older residents. Its potential value exceeded $12 million. Nathan had chased that contract for nearly 2 years. Before the final board vote, the county released a promotional video. Ivy found it online and brought us into the living room to watch. The video opened with Nathan moving through Hathaway's offices. Employees smiled in the background. An aide helped an older man to his feet. A carpenter fitted a polished handrail to a wall. Then our family photograph filled the screen. The image showed Evelyn and me standing outside the original office, hands resting on Nathan's shoulders. My parents gave their lives to helping people stay capable, independent, and treated with dignity, Nathan said in the voiceover. Hathaway carries those same values into every home. Evelyn stared at the screen without blinking. Then her own words came up, a quotation placed under her name. Good care begins when the professional signing the plan is willing to answer for it. She had spoken that sentence at the very first staff training. They are using you to win a county contract, Ivy said. They have been using us for years, I replied. The footage ended on Nathan standing in the lower-level guest suite of the new house. He called it a model for multi-generational living and promised that his parents would always have a safe place with him. That was the very suite he had pushed us to admire on our way out of the party. Evelyn left without a word. I found her on the porch. He built that room for the footage, she said. Not for us. Maybe he truly meant for us to live in it someday. Would that intention soften the deception? The county board vote was set for the following Tuesday. Marisol Vega instructed us not to reach out to board members while investigators worked alongside state and federal agencies. Whether the vote could be halted was something she couldn't say. What if they approve it? I asked. The contract carries compliance conditions. A written condition does nothing for the person who receives a faulty grab bar next month. Marisol understood that. She also had an investigation to guard. If Hathaway got wind of how much evidence existed, documents could vanish, witnesses could face pressure, and money could shift beyond reach. Patricia suggested a restrained approach. Loretta would inform the county attorney that our names and credentials were being disputed, and that active regulatory complaints had been filed. We would not expose confidential evidence or assert anything beyond what we knew firsthand. The county attorney acknowledged the letter, but would not say whether the vote might be delayed. Nathan called on Monday evening. "Stay home tomorrow," he said. I was at my workbench sanding a maple board just to give my hands something to do. "Why would we go?" "The board may raise questions about your letter. Then we will answer them. Dad, this contract steadies everything. Once it clears, I can set things right. No layoffs, public funding, reliable revenue for services you may or may not provide. That is not honest. Honest is an invoice that matches what was actually done." He went quiet. "If this falls apart, Diane sells her stake. The lenders call our debt. Whatever the company was supposed to build for Ivy gets lost. Ivy does not want to see that happen. She is 21. She hasn't sorted out what she wants yet. She knows she wants no part of her grandmother's login on records she never touched." Nathan's breath moved slowly through the phone. "I am speaking as your son, and I am answering as your father. Pull the bid, look after the patients, and explain to the board why you can't. Then we'll be there." Just before the call ended, he said something I hadn't braced for. "Dad, I still think about the first ramp we put up together." I closed my eyes. It had gone in for a retired school custodian. Nathan was 34. The business was barely off the ground, and he put in 10 hours beside me through August heat. When we finished, the man rolled himself onto his porch for the first time in 7 months. Nathan sat in the truck after and wept. "So do I said. I was not pretending. I know. That was the tragedy. The good he had once cared about had been genuine. It simply hadn't stayed stronger than his hunger for the life he felt success owed him." The boardroom was at capacity 30 minutes before the meeting opened. Hearthway employees wore green badges and filled 3 rows. Several had brought patients with them. County staff lined the walls. Reporters had taken seats near the front. Word of a regulatory dispute had been spreading since the attorney's letter entered the public record as part of the agenda. Evelyn and I sat in the rear, with Loretta, Patricia, and Ivy. Nathan came through a side entrance with Diane and Gideon Spear. He kept his gaze forward. The first hour moved through road maintenance library allocations and a zoning matter. Routine business proceeded, while my pulse ran as though the walls were burning. Then the chair called the aging at home contract. Nathan stepped to the lectern. What came next was the strongest case I had ever heard him make. He covered demographic pressures, rural loneliness, unnecessary hospital stays, and the price of putting someone in a nursing home before their time. He argued that preserving dignity meant linking services together. He singled out Hearthway workers by name. He told the story of a widow still living in the house she had shared with her husband, made possible because an aide, a driver, and a carpenter operated from a single plan. Not one word he used was false. That was exactly what made it so hard to hear. Diane followed with the figures. 97% of scheduled visits completed, 94% patient satisfaction, 40% reduction in falls after home modification. The charts were polished enough to make any doubt look careless. Then a commissioner raised the letter Evelyn and I had submitted. Gideon moved to the microphone. "Hearthway is working through a private records disagreement with 2 former consultants," he said. "No determination of wrongdoing has been reached. These individuals are relatives of our founder, which has regrettably complicated the lines of communication. Former consultants, private disagreement, family complication." 3 tidy phrases and hundreds of falsified records became nothing worse than a strained conversation at the holidays. The chair opened the floor for public comment. Loretta pressed my arm lightly. "Only what we prepared." Evelyn stood first. The room settled into silence as she moved down the aisle. Several employees knew her on sight. Kezia, seated near the middle, dropped her eyes. At the lectern, Evelyn adjusted the microphone. "My name is Evelyn Crandall," she said. "I am a registered nurse. I stepped away from paid practice 6 years ago and now volunteer at a free clinic." Her voice wavered on the opening words, then held firm. "I assisted Hearthway in drafting early clinical policies for 90 days during its first year of operation. I never authorized ongoing use of my signature or my nursing license. Records in circulation today show me supervising patient care on days I was elsewhere for patients I had never met. At least one patient named in those records was already dead." Murmurs moved through the room. Gideon rose chair. "This concerns an active confidential matter." The county attorney told him to sit. Evelyn continued. "I am not here to allege a crime. I am asking that no public care contract be awarded on the strength of my name, my words, or any claim that I provide oversight of Hearthway. I do not." She stepped back. Nathan's eyes stayed fixed straight ahead. Then I went to the lectern. "My name is Walter Crandall. Hearthway listed me as its senior accessibility specialist. That is inaccurate. My contractor registration lapsed 9 years ago. It appears on dozens of active projects I never visited. I set a single photograph on the document camera, Agnes's grab bar anchor, torn loose from the wall. Her name and address had been removed from the image. This hardware was mounted in an elderly woman's bathroom. The invoice on file called it a completed safety conversion, certified, under my seal. I would not have signed off on that bar to hold a towel, let alone a person. One of the Hearthway employees began to cry. I faced the board. My son built this company on a belief that Evelyn and I still hold. Elderly people deserve to live safely at home. Hearthway has workers who come in every day trying to make exactly that happen. They are owed leaders whose paperwork tells the truth about their labor. So are the patients." I went back to my seat. The chair called a recess. In the corridor, reporters formed a circle around Loretta. She said only that we would not comment on an active investigation. Hearthway's staff gathered in uneasy clusters. Some looked our way with open anger. Others were giving Nathan a wide berth. He found me near a water fountain. "You humiliated Mom," he said. She chose to speak for herself. "You turned our family into evidence. You put our family in the presentation." His jaw pulled tight. "Do you understand what a suspended vote means? You lose money, patients lose continuity, then transfer their care to a provider whose records are clean. You think a handoff is that easy? Some of these people have had the same aide for years." He was not wrong. The truth does not make transition painless. I resented him for wielding something real to protect something corrupt. "Step away from this," I said. "Sit down with the county and plan an orderly transfer, and account for what you learned about the documentation system Diane put in place, what you already knew last year." His eyes moved toward the boardroom, where his wife stood beside Gideon. Recognizing that something is wrong is not the same as knowing the full picture. What did you actually do once you knew enough? He had nothing to say. After 40 minutes, the board came back in. The vote was unanimous. The contract would be postponed while the county attorney assessed Hathaway's eligibility. Existing care arrangements would remain active under heightened oversight, so no patient was left without services. It was not a victory. No charge had been filed. No money had come back. Evelyn's license review was still open. Hathaway kept running, but the company left without the $12 million it had sought behind our names. As we walked out, Kezia found Evelyn just ahead of the cameras. "Thank you for saying there are good people in there," she said. Evelyn held her. That image was on the internet before the evening was over. The online comments split sharply. A handful called us courageous. Others charged that we had gutted our son's livelihood out of envy, and at least one person argued that parents our age ought to step back and let the younger generation lead. I shut the laptop. That evening, Ivy looked up from the table and asked whether we had come out ahead. "No," I said. "We stood in a room that counted and spoke what was true." "Doesn't that matter?" Evelyn turned it over quietly. Sometimes, she said, it is only the next honest thing. The firm that had been set to acquire Hathaway's home modification arm pulled out 4 days after the county meeting. Their due diligence team had pressed for evidence that professional certifications were legitimate. Hathaway Senior Services couldn't produce it without exposing the whole dispute. That sale would have covered a credit line falling due at month's end. The bank locked down Hathaway's expansion accounts. Diane sought temporary creditor protection. Nathan reached out to Loretta, requesting a private meeting. No wife, no company counsel. She wouldn't agree to anything off the record, but arranged a session with his criminal attorney present. Evelyn and I weren't included. That suited us. By then, every family exchange had curdled into a chance to revise history. 2 days on, Loretta shared only what bore on our own choices. Nathan was trying to create separation between himself and Diane. His claim was that she had engineered the fraudulent documentation system, run the linked companies, and shifted funds while keeping him largely uninformed. He was weighing cooperation with investigators. "Does cooperation mean telling the truth?" Evelyn asked. "It should, or enough of it to trim his sentence. The two can coincide." The distinction stung her, but prosecutors care more about serviceable evidence than clean motives. Investigators had traced 3 companies back to Hathaway Senior Services. One handled medical staffing. Another furnished construction materials. The third held equipment leased back to the agency. Diane's interests ran through her brother and a former college roommate. Hathaway had paid those companies above market rates. A portion of those inflated payments underwrote the down payment on the new house. Nathan's salary covered the mortgage, but it was drawn from a company bled through fabricated billing and insider contracts. No single stolen check had bought that house. It had been assembled from thousands of small choices that converted public care money into private comfort. The concealed room at the party was an off-hours record center. Before, audit staff were sometimes driven to the house to fill gaps in the documentation. The locked cabinets held material pending reconciliation. Evelyn had walked through that door during one of those weekends. What gave Ivy's evidence its weight was a single message from Diane. "Use MB Clinical Admin for the legacy queue. We need clean supervision before county review." That message had gone to a records supervisor 2 weeks before the housewarming. System logs showed hundreds of files accessed through a dormant administrator account carrying Evelyn's initials. Nathan had received the monthly report flagging that account's activity. He could no longer claim awareness of only one isolated problem the prior year. The same logs showed my digital seal in use. A construction manager had attached it to project files from his own account. Emails confirmed he had checked with Nathan, whether I was still authorizing Hearthway work. Nathan's reply, "Dad supports the mission. Keep projects moving." 7 words. No instruction to falsify a credential, no explicit authorization. Just enough room for an employee to do what revenue demanded. I read those words until the screen went soft. When Nathan was a boy, he framed requests so that refusal felt unreasonable. Dad won't mind it. Proceeded a borrowed tool, a late night, or a weekend of friends at the lake cabin. Most of the time he was right. Sometimes I smiled at his assurance. He had turned that boyhood tactic into a leadership philosophy. Approval was assumed, withdrawing it required an act of nerve, and nerve was branded disloyalty. On a Monday morning, the state served warrants at Hearthway's central office and at Nathan and Diane's new house. We found out through the news. Camera footage showed agents moving boxes through the same entrance where Nathan had once asked why we were leaving early. Staff clustered outside, holding phones. A correspondent described an inquiry into billing, professional identity misuse, and public grants. Ivy switched off the television. Everyone at school will see that. Evelyn moved to sit beside her. "You didn't call those agents here. My messages helped. Your messages showed what was already there." Nathan phoned me at noon from his attorney's office. "They took Mom's photographs," he said. Records bearing her name. Ivy's computer. Her attorney had arranged that weeks earlier. "Diane says I'm the target. What is your lawyer advising, that I should cooperate? Then do it." His voice broke. "Dad, I could lose everything." That line made me angry in a way his threats never had. Agnes could have lost her footing. Evelyn could have lost her license. Ivy could have lost her future. Taxpayers lost money. Workers may lose jobs. You keep claiming that word everything as though it belongs to you alone. He started to cry. I had heard Nathan cry at gravesites after his first marriage fell apart and the day Ivy was born. A father doesn't grow numb to that sound just because the child is 44. I did not mean for this to happen. Meaning, I said, is where a decision begins. Responsibility is where it lands. Diane told me all large companies reconcile records. And you believed that I needed to. It was the most truthful answer he had given me in months. He needed the bank to hold steady. He needed the county contract. He needed investors to see growth. He needed that house as proof he had built something real. Each need had quietly licensed him to walk past the next warning sign. Tell them everything I said. Will you stand by me? I glanced at Evelyn across the kitchen. She could hear every word on both ends. I will not lie for you. I will not go after you. I will not stop loving you. That isn't what I asked. It is what I have to give. The call ended. Evelyn stared at the silent phone. Was it enough? I asked. It has to be. Hearthway stopped submitting claims to government programs in November. The outcome was equal parts suspension and negotiated agreement. Regulators permitted limited private pay services to continue under an outside clinical administrator, while counties and insurers moved vulnerable clients elsewhere. A court-appointed restructuring officer took over the finances. Nathan stepped down as chief executive. The board removed Diane. For the first time in 10 years, neither of them could unlock the office door. The transitions were painful. Some patients rejected unfamiliar aids. Drivers lost their routes. Nurses labored to rebuild medication schedules from records they couldn't fully trust. County workers staffed emergency lines. Local agencies absorbed caseloads that outran their capacity. Nathan's warning had carried some truth. When those in charge corrupt a care system, blameless people absorb the damage even after the wrongdoing ends. Once the nursing board cleared, her Evelyn joined a transition team as a volunteer. She kept away from any Hearthway record that bore her name. Instead, she sat with families' reconciled medication lists and tracked when a caregiver had genuinely last appeared. I found a place on a county inspection team reviewing accessibility modifications at regulator-selected homes. The quality ranged widely. Some work was solid, other jobs were left unfinished. A few existed only as supplies stacked in someone's garage. At one home, an 87-year-old veteran named Russell Deaton had paid nothing, yet supposedly received a $26,000 bathroom conversion. Hearthway had swapped out his toilet seat and dropped off a shower chair. "I thought the rest was coming," he said. My seal was on the invoice. I sat at his kitchen table and told him I was sorry. "You didn't do it," Russ answered. "My name helped them call it finished." "Then use your name to actually finish it." The county couldn't release funds for new work while the disputed claim was still under review. I phoned former colleagues and asked for donated labor. A plumbing supplier offered fixtures at cost. We finished the bathroom under a church program logged every hour and mailed the records to Russ. That one project drew something larger into being. Other former Hearthway workers reached out. Carpenters wanted to go back and fix hazardous jobs. Drivers offered to ferry patients through the transition delays. Someone built a volunteer call list. Kezia managed weekend aid coordination without asking anyone to skirt labor rules or falsify time. We called the effort open record because Ivy said each job should be traceable from the first request to the final receipt. Loretta required written policies before we touched another project. Good intentions, she reminded us, were also how Hearthway started. Documentation guards the honest, too. Every volunteer logged hours. Every client got a written scope of work. Every inspection was independent. No one used my seal. I carried no active registration, so I worked beneath licensed professionals and listed myself only as a volunteer carpenter. Evelyn signed no clinical documents. She counseled families and directed medical questions to active providers. The boundaries felt slow. They also felt right. Before Thanksgiving, the new house went on the market. The listing photos spread online. The wine cellar, the pool, the stone fireplace, the lower-level suite. The asking price came in just under what Nathan and Diane had paid. A court order directed the proceeds towards secured debt and potential restitution. Ivy scanned the listing a single time. "My room is still painted green," she said. 3 nights was all she had ever slept there. Nathan had taken a furnished apartment close to where his attorney worked. Diane moved in with her sister and cut off direct contact with Ivy, routing everything through lawyers. Their marriage had been folded into the pile of things under legal scrutiny. Ivy spent Thanksgiving at our place. Betty came as well. She walked through the door, holding 2 pies and something close to an apology. I wanted the version where Nathan helped me to be the whole truth. She said it was part of the truth. Evelyn answered, "How do I hold both without dropping the part that hurts?" Oh. My brother connected by video from Florida. Nobody said anything comfortable, but nobody was dishonest either. No one defended false records. No one hung the word monster on Nathan's name. We spoke his name during old stories because scrubbing every good memory from the record would have been its own form of dishonesty. After the meal, Nathan called. Evelyn set the phone on speaker. "Happy Thanksgiving," he said. The room answered softly. He wanted to know what was on the table. Ivy told him about the pies. Bet went through the sweet potatoes. For 5 minutes, we could have been any family trading notes on a holiday dinner. Then Nathan said, "My lawyer believes charges are coming." Everything in the room went quiet. "Are you going to tell the truth?" Ivy asked. "Yes, all of it." A pause. "All that I know." Ivy shut her eyes. "That sounds like lawyer language. I have to be careful." "You were careful when you used Grandma's name." Evelyn laid a hand on Ivy's arm. Nathan did not come back with anger. "You're right. 2 words, small and plain. Nobody granted him forgiveness on the strength of them. No agency reopened its files. No patient saw a dollar returned. But he had taken a judgment and for once left it standing where it landed. Before he hung up, he asked if he might come to see us once the charges were behind him. "Not yet," Evelyn said. "When you can walk into this house without needing us to declare you innocent," he whispered goodnight. I wandered the living room after that. The furniture carried its age without pretending otherwise. The kitchen floor was overdue for replacement. Cold air pushed through the edge of one window frame in spite of 2 rounds of weather stripping. Nothing inside our home was built to catch an investor's eye, but each piece of it had been bought or built or mended or offered by someone who meant to keep it. Standing there, I finally grasped why the mansion had felt hollow even before the family scattered from it. Charges came down in February. Nathan and Diane were accused of conspiring to submit false healthcare claims, using professional identities without authorization, and making false statements in public grant applications. Diane carried additional counts tied to the related companies. 2 billing managers were charged on separate tracks. Investigators reported that certain employees had given cooperation and faced no prosecution. The story ran Nathan's photograph next to words no parent is ready to read. Founder fraud defendant. Evelyn went through the article, once creased the newspaper shut and slid it into a drawer. She did not discard it. She said, "Forgetting was not the same as healing." Nathan reached a plea agreement 3 months on. He acknowledged that Evelyn's signature and my professional seal had continued in use well past the point when we withdrew permission. He acknowledged that he allowed false records to prop up claims in public contracts. He acknowledged that he let the practice run because surfacing it would have endangered Hathaway's financing and the sale he was counting on to close the gap in its books. Diane entered a not guilty plea and readied for trial. At Nathan's plea hearing, Evelyn and I took seats behind him, not with his attorneys, not among the press. Ivy sat between us. The judge put it to Nathan directly had anyone pressured him into this plea. "No, Your Honor. Are you pleading guilty because you are guilty?" He swallowed. "Yes." She walked through every count in ordinary language. Each time she asked whether what she described was accurate, Nathan answered in his own name with his own voice. No drafted statement spoke in his place. No subordinate had initialed the page for him. No parent carried the weight of it. When the proceeding ended, Nathan turned in our direction. A court officer gave him a moment. "Mom," he said. Evelyn cupped his face. "Tell the whole truth at sentencing." He nodded. Then his eyes moved to me. "I kept thinking I could fix it before you found out." "You knew patients had already found out," I said. "They just did not know what to call it." His gaze dropped. Ivy pulled him into a hug. It was short, and it ached. Love had not left, but it was done pretending. Nathan later turned over records that assisted in recovering funds from the related companies. He laid out how Diane routed the transfers and how he signed off on reports without pressing for answers he did not want. The cooperation trimmed his sentence without erasing it. Ahead of sentencing, the court opened a window for written statements from patient staff, insurers, anyone whose professional name had been taken without consent. Loretta asked whether Evelyn and I planned to submit one. "Would it help him?" Evelyn asked. "That depends on what you write." "Would it hurt him?" "That also depends on what you write." We worked at it for 3 nights. My opening draft read as an indictment. Evelyn's read as a mother's plea for the judge to see the child Nathan once was. Neither one held together, so we started over. We put down that Nathan had once set out to meet a genuine need, and that real care had reached real patients through the staff he assembled. We put down that his early sincerity made the choices that followed more painful to absorb, not easier to excuse. He had known precisely why professional credentials carried weight. He had known why elderly people leaned on paperwork they had no way to audit themselves. He turned that understanding into a tool for making fraudulent claims look clean. We did not ask for the maximum. We did not ask for nothing. We asked the court to demand full disclosure, full restitution, and a bar on handling other people's care money until accountability had been legally established. Evelyn closed the statement with a single paragraph. "I love my son. Love is the reason I want the court to sentence the man who made these choices. Not a softened portrait offered by his family, and not a caricature drawn by the prosecution. Mercy that sidesteps truth would pass along the same lesson that let this damage accumulate, that someone else's well-being can be made to pay for his avoidance." Agnes filed her own statement. At sentencing, she made her way to the lectern, carrying a new cane and wearing a burgundy cardigan. She talked about the loose grab bar the visits billed while she was away, and the day she asked the staff whether her own records could get her in trouble. "I had lived an honest life for 84 years, she said, and one company's forms turned me into a woman who feared her own memory might be used against her." Then she faced Nathan. "Your parents came to my door and told me none of this was my fault. You built something for people like me. You should have been the one to say those words." Kezia described workers who questioned their own logs because internal reports claimed visits they remembered completing had never happened. A nurse recounted finding that notes filed under her name after the fact had been blended with Evelyn's fabricated supervision records. A county official detailed how inconsistent outcomes held up financing that other providers were waiting on. Nathan sat through all of it without lifting his head. When his moment came, he didn't reach for the remarks his communications team once would have polished. He said he had handled every breakdown as though it were an anomaly until deception became the routine way of getting through to the following month. He named patients in his apology when doing so was permitted. He apologized to staff for letting their honest work become a shield for false reports. Then he turned to face us. "I told myself I built Hathaway out of everything my parents gave me." He said that was only true at the start. "Later, I borrowed their standing to paper over the gap between what I promised and what I actually built. They did not fail me by telling the truth. I failed them by making the truth something to fear." Evelyn's hand found mine and held it. The words did not give back the years. They did not restore the public funds or lift Agnes's dread from where it had settled. But they mattered because there was no if inside them. The judge handed down 30 months in federal custody, followed by supervised release and imposed joint restitution with the remaining defendants. She barred Nathan from overseeing any organization that received health care funds for years beyond his release date. Diane was found guilty at trial. Her term ran longer. People following the coverage called that justice. Evelyn wept for 3 days. A verdict can be right and still hollow out a mother. The nursing board issued a written ruling that summer, clearing Evelyn's name. It found no basis for concluding she had created, authorized, or drawn any benefit from the fraudulent records. The board also noted that she had rescinded her original authorization, brought the subsequent misuse to light, given her full cooperation, and worked to safeguard patients through the handoff period. One sentence addressed the form she had failed to flag 8 years prior. Earlier notification would have reduced the opportunity for continued misuse. Evelyn returned to that sentence long after she had finished the rest. "They cleared you," I said. They also told the truth. She asked the board to release the decision publicly rather than seal it. Patricia cautioned that going public could stir the story back up. Evelyn held firm. "My name was used publicly," she said. The recognition happened publicly. The free clinic gathered for a small midday meal in Evelyn's honor, paper plates, a grocery store cake, not a camera, anywhere. Her old badge had cracked along the edge, so the director handed her a replacement. Evelyn looped it around her neck, then told the room something none of them were expecting. She would step away from bedside nursing before the year was out. "Nobody forced my hand," she said. "I am deciding where this experience does the most good now." What she envisioned was education, sitting with older patients and their families, walking them through care documents, helping them confirm a provider's credentials, and making sure they never felt ashamed pushing back on a bill. My own reckoning at the contractor's office ran along the same lines. The state had determined that my lapsed license number was being cited on active filings without current standing. My name was stripped from every disputed approval, and the records were forwarded for restitution proceedings. I let the registration go. Instead, I finished a volunteer safety assessor course and accepted one firm condition: any project my team had touched would require a separate licensed professional to sign off. The final word would never again be mine alone. "After all of this, and you still want oversight?" Ivy asked. "Especially after all of this." Open Record drew a modest county grant from the same county that had previously held back the Housewarming Senior Services contract. We said yes only after Loretta had gone through the controls carefully. Those funds covered independent inspections, a patient advocate, and a public ledger, tracking every dollar. Agnes Whitaker took the front row at the first meeting. "Are you going to make me work through all that paperwork?" she asked. "You are a librarian," I said. "We are counting on exactly that." She became our most exacting volunteer. The mansion sold 11 months after the housewarming. The price had softened legal filings, unnerved buyers, and the broader market had gone cold. Once the mortgage taxes and closing costs were settled, the remaining proceeds flowed into the restitution fund. The wine cellar had not rescued a soul. The pool had not preserved anyone's livelihood. The lower-level suite never held a stick of our furniture. The startup loan vanished into the bankruptcy proceedings. We recovered less than half of what the company had once repaid us, and attorney fees consumed most of that remainder. By any honest count, we were in the red twice over. The lake lot we held. When litigation wound down, the bank unfroze my business account, and Housewarming Senior Services dropped its civil action. Loretta's final invoice arrived less than our worst fear, more than we would have chosen. The cabin stayed ours. Ivy came up that summer. She had switched tracks, leaving health information management for healthcare compliance. My first reaction was unease. It looked like she was building her future around her father's wreckage. "I am choosing the piece of this that keeps the next family from ending up here," she told me. We tackled the dock repairs side by side. Ivy measured the boards, marked each screw point, and sent back one plank because a slight warp ran through it. "You are becoming difficult," I told her. "Grandma says precision is respect." She had lifted that from Agnes. On the final evening, Nathan phoned from the facility. The call was short and monitored. He asked after the lake. "Is the old canoe still leaking?" he said. "Only when it touches water." He laughed. For just a moment, I caught a glimpse of the man he might have been. Then, "I am sorry about the money. The money was the easiest part. I know that now." He mentioned he had been tutoring a fellow inmate in basic accounting. None of us missed the irony. Near the end of the call, he raised the question of whether he would ever be welcome at the cabin again. I held my eyes on the water. The right answer was not permanent exile, but neither was reassurance offered ahead of any evidence. "When you are released, we start with coffee in town," I said. "Trust earns smaller steps than love does." He accepted that without argument. It was the first arrangement we had made together that did not rest on the fiction that the past was resolved. Afterward, Ivy and I hauled 2 chairs to the far end of the dock. The lake lay still enough to double every cloud overhead. "Do you think Dad will change?" she asked. "I think he can." "That is not the same answer." "No." A dragonfly landed on the railing, and she watched it. "I want to forgive him before he walks back through the door," she said. "What I am afraid of is that everyone will take it as permission to expect trust from me, too. Forgiveness is not a job offer." Grandma had said nearly the same thing. She tends to say it with more precision. Ivy smiled. I told her she owed Nathan no timetable for healing. She could write back and still decline visits. She could see him once and let months pass before deciding anything further. She could hold on to the father who steadied her bicycle seat while keeping a firm line against the man who had pressed her to falsify records. Older people are routinely told that keeping peace means letting things go. Younger ones are told that grievance signals betrayal. Both notions make honesty harder than it has any right to be. A boundary is not a ruling on whether someone can change. It is, I told her, the ground on which you can watch safely and find out whether change is genuine. Ivy rested her head on my shoulder. We stayed until the clouds drifted beyond the far shore, and the lake grew clear enough to mirror whatever rose above it. Nathan's letter came near the close of his first year inside. 12 pages. The first 10 moved through his boyhood. The business Diane's pressure, the banks, the workers, the dread of collapse. Every piece was accurate. Stacked together, the effect read like a fresh argument for the defense. Page 11 was different. He wrote that signing the first fraudulent form had scared him badly. Rather than stopping, he found the dread eased when revenue followed. The second form offered less resistance. Once hundreds had accumulated, he had stopped asking whether any individual claim was honest. The question shifted to whether the business could survive without the deception. Then came this: "I used the good things you taught me as advertising and treated the limits you taught me as obstacles. I did not steal your signatures only because they were useful. I stole them because I believed being your son meant your character belonged to me." Evelyn read that paragraph aloud twice. Nothing in the letter requested forgiveness. There was no appeal for Ivy to visit. Diane received no blame. What it held was a list of patients he carried in his memory, and workers he had failed, and a pledge to direct every dollar of lawful post-release earnings toward restitution. "This is the first apology he has written," Evelyn said. "He had apologized before. Those were apologies for outcomes. This one was for choices. We answered together. We said we loved him. We said love alone could not hand back authority, money, or trust. We described what life after release would look like: no entry to our accounts, no shared venture, no borrowing of our names, no pressure placed on Ivy. Whatever connection remained would be built through conduct, not words." Then Evelyn added one sentence: "You are more than the worst thing you did, but becoming more requires you to stop asking others to carry it." We mailed the letter. Forgiveness did not come as warmth. It came as a decision to keep a door in sight while leaving the lock in place. 2 years after the housewarming, Open Record moved into my old workshop. Cabinet saws had stood in that building once, along with stacked oak and young apprentices, learning that blades do not forgive carelessness. We scrubbed the floor, put in better light, and broke the space into 3 spare rooms. The first held a wide table where anyone could arrive, with billing statements, care documents, or grant applications. The second was fitted with grab rails, shower benches, ramps, and door hardware so older adults could handle the equipment before committing to it. Volunteers ran the third, checking contractor licenses, reconciling invoices against recorded work, following up with every client after a job closed. During open hours, nothing was behind a lock. One rule was posted on the wall: this person whose name appears on the work must be prepared to answer for it. No attribution sat beneath it. No family name was needed to give it weight. Agnes cut the ribbon at the opening with sewing scissors from her kitchen. Kezia arrived with 6 former Hearthway employees who had since landed positions at agencies that operated honestly. Ivy walked attendees through the public ledger. Loretta stationed herself near the coffee and advised everyone within earshot to read before signing. Evelyn wore her volunteer badge. I kept to the back and watched older neighbors file in gripping folders against their chests. A few looked ashamed. A few looked furious. Most had come for something simpler, a second pair of eyes on what had been done in their names. Clifford and Norma Mabry were the first clients at our table, both in their late 70s. A contractor had billed them for a stair lift that failed after 6 weeks, then claimed the warranty required a service plan they had never been shown. Norma apologized repeatedly for missing it. Clifford kept saying he should have shielded her from the whole situation. Ivy spread the documents out and found the warranty on page 14. It did not require a service plan. Kezia called the manufacturer while I examined the installation alongside a licensed technician. A loose connection had caused it. The repair took 20 minutes. When the lift carried Norma safely upstairs, Clifford began to cry. "We thought we had made a foolish mistake," he said. "Asking for help is not foolish," Evelyn told him. "A contract designed to exhaust you is the problem." They came back the following month as volunteers. Clifford welcomed people at the door. Norma sorted warranty folders by date. Nobody paid them use their image in advertising or counted their generosity as a billable service. That small act of repair taught me more about genuine care than anything Nathan had ever laid out in a presentation. The work itself had weight, but so did the way accountability stayed visible from the opening question to the final walkthrough. That was the moment I understood what our son had almost stripped from us. It was not only the money, the reputation, or our standing in the field. He had nearly taken our readiness to trust the act of helping people. We chose not to surrender that. Nathan came home the following spring. Our first meeting was coffee in town, exactly as we had agreed. He looked older and quieter. He did not ask for a position at Open Record. He did not ask to move back in. He brought a list of restitution payments and asked whether Ivy might be willing to see him when she was ready. She eventually was. Our family did not go back to what it had been. Going back was never what we were after. We built something smaller, slower, and more honest. Visitors sometimes ask whether I regret handing Nathan the original $85,000. I regret overlooking the early warnings. I regret confusing success with proof of character. I regret every patient who was left to wonder whether the care they received was real. But I do not regret believing my son was capable of building something worthwhile. That belief was not the failure. The failure would have been shielding the appearance of good long after the truth had made itself plain. At the housewarming, Evelyn whispered that we needed to go. She was right. We had to leave the mansion, the performance, and the version of family loyalty that required silence. What we walked toward was not revenge. It was ownership. Our names belonged to us. Our choices belonged to us. And whatever was left of our family would have to be built without stealing either. Thank you for sitting with this story all the way to the end. It did not finish the way any of us would have chosen. Walter and Evelyn did not walk away whole. They walked away honest, and that cost them more than most people will ever understand. They lost a son, at least the version of him they had believed in. They lost years of quiet trust in their own names. What they kept was their dignity, and I believe God made sure that was the one thing no court case, no forged signature, and no prison sentence could ever transfer to someone else. The Lord's timing in bringing the truth to light through Ivy, through Agnes Whitaker, through their own willingness to stand at that county board meeting was not accidental. Here is what these father stories and the people who live them keep teaching me. First, trust your unease early. When something feels wrong about a contract, a credential, or a kindness that costs too much, do not wait for a housewarming party to prove you right. Second, your name is not a gift you owe your children. It is yours. The moment someone borrows it without asking, that is theft even inside a family. Third, confronting the truth is not the same as destroying the family. In this dad's revenge, if you can even call honesty revenge, Walter and Evelyn did not break their home. They refused to keep pretending it was intact when it was already gone. Fourth, real restoration is slower and smaller than what was lost. And that is not failure. That is how honest things are built. If this story moved you, I hope you'll share it with someone who needs to hear it. A friend carrying a quiet worry, a parent who gave too much and is wondering why. Leave a comment below and tell me what stayed with you. And if you haven't yet subscribed to His Hidden Revenge, there are more stories here, and every one of them is worth your time. Thank you for listening, take good care of yourself, and I'll see you in the next one.